And action. Hey, I am Baz Luhrmann, and you are watching Filmmaker Toolkit podcast with IndieWire.
Hey, mama, don't you treat me wrong. Put your dress on, go home.
Welcome to IndieWire's Filmmaker Toolkit podcast. I'm Jim Hemphill, features writer for IndieWire. My guest today is Baz Luhrmann, whose last movie, Elvis, was my favorite movie of its year. In fact, if you were a regular reader of IndieWire at that time, you probably got sick of my articles because I think I wrote 7 or 8 of them. He's here today to talk about his latest film, another Elvis movie, Epic, Elvis Presley In Concert, which takes a different approach to the king. This one uses mostly unseen, behind-the-scenes and concert footage to give us Elvis' story from his own point of view in his own words. And it's an incredible movie, an incredible immersive theatrical experience, and I'm really happy to have Baz here to talk about it.
I'm really happy to be talking to you this morning.
So I guess I want to start with the origins of this. Yeah. I'm assuming that this came about while you were researching or working on your previous Elvis movie. How did you come across this footage?
This is truly an accidental movie, just complete accident, because Ernst Jorgenstein, who's kind of the scientist of all things Elvis, I mean, there's nothing he doesn't know in that world. And I was working on Elvis the movie. He talked about these mythical, maybe missing couple of reels from That's the Way It Is. And he said, if you have a chance, try and get them. And I thought, gee, maybe I could use them to do the showroom sequence. We wouldn't have to, have millions of extras and all that sort of thing. And I had the money because literally I had to send someone into the salt mines in Kansas City, where MGM keeps all their negatives. And I'm a bit like, oh, maybe they'll come up with something. And they sent me pictures, and it was a little bit, Raiders of the Lost Ark, kicks the door in, dust. And there is 65 boxes all over the floor, some with stuff stolen, some missed, and all kind of rotting, actually. And so we bring the treasure trove back to Warner's, and it smelled so strongly of vinegar, because that is the smell of negative when it's starting to disintegrate. And then we start to print, and it's actually, that's the way it is. It's the Elvis in 1970 in Vegas at his prime, but 16 mil from the tour. And we come into possession of some really rare 8 mil at that time. So we've got this crazy amount of material, no sound. I realize I can't really use it for the showroom. I end up building the showroom, but we get to do some experiments on it. And at the end of the film, John O'Redman and John O'Redman is my editor, producer on this, and it's a 50-50 thing. We were a partnership in this. And we're like, well, what are we going to do? We've got to do something with this. But we can't reheat the old docos. No one was really interested in giving us any money to do anything. So we thought, And then we find this 35-minute, 40-minute tape of Elvis just talking really unguarded. Now, I cannot overstate, Jim, how rare this is, to hear Elvis just kind of talking about his life. And that was a sort of light bulb moment. That was, what if we just got out of the way and let Elvis tell us his story and sing us his story, sort of in a dreamscape?
There's been a lot written and a lot said, but never from my side of the story.
Because everything about Elvis, all docos, bless their hearts, but they're always talking heads, because the whole culture of Elvis through Colonel was, Elvis, you don't say anything, right? You just do the music. And that was a liberation and the beginning of a kind of really epic journey. I mean, it goes from it was on again, off again, people didn't want to do it. It was finding the sound for all that material. Like, we found mag tapes, so we found original sound, but then at some point I'd be sending dudes out to car parks in, Detroit with some gangster with some money going, I'll give you some, 2 minutes of the, like trading on the black market to get all the sound. And then the gentleman I saw last night spent 2 years lip syncing it. And then we had the material. And then so the real work begins.
So how do you even go about doing that detective work of finding someone, like you say, a random person in Detroit who happens to have a couple minutes of audio?
We had a detective. I mean, literally we had someone employed full-time. I managed to get enough money scraped off just because I had the film going and the film was a success. to do, I mean, you might call them a researcher, but they're actual researcher detectives. They literally, we met, for example, a reclusive, completely private collector. And if you know anything about collectors, stamp collectors or whatever, they're not really there trading. Some trade, but some just want to own the stuff. It's like people who collect art. I've got a Picasso. And they don't really want to do anything with it except I own it. And there's a very private one who, after so many meetings and bringing him in and trying to get trust, finally gave us some really crucial stuff that we needed, and thanks to him. But it is like that, and it was a labor of love. We were a tiny little team, and it was probably the most enjoyable thing I've ever made. It was really enjoyable to do. And I'm not saying I don't enjoy anything, but everything is usually fraught with labor and complexity and a mountain climb.
Well, it's funny because I feel like you gave Elvis and Elvis fans something interesting in this movie, which is you kind of gave Elvis, the movie star, a great director, which he rarely had when he was a movie star. I mean, I know he worked with Don Siegel, Michael Curtiz, or whatever, but generally, with a few exceptions, most of the Elvis movies were beneath his charisma and his talent.
Sure.
You watch something like I just watched Live a Little, Love a Little recently, and I mean, that movie's like barely comparable. It's just completely nonsensical.
Well, wait, I got to tell you about that. I mean, what happens there is, like after, I mean, by the way, he's great in the Curtiz picture. I mean, you really actually think he's got chops. Yeah. And then suddenly, he got to go to the army. Mum dies within weeks. And the center of his heart, I mean, first of all, he's a kid. He's the most famous kid on the planet. There's no precedent for a teenage kind of icon. It's all happening, as he constantly says, it all happened in a flash. And then army, like BTS, that's like being a K-pop star, the only people that still have to suddenly go to the army. And then his heart is ripped out when he leaves his mum. He's alone. And when he comes back, the Colonel makes him the highest paid actor in Hollywood. I mean, a river of money he's getting. But he's hearing all the time that the studio head goes, well, we have the Elvis movies to pay for the serious ones. And I cannot overstate what a movie buff he was. Elvis would go into the cinema in the middle of the night, and he watched Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove 17 times. That's how much. He's a crazy Kubrick fan. And his great dream was to be a great actor. But he's incredibly good looking. He's the king of Hollywood. And he's just kind of living the life. But inside, he's feeling a little bit spiritually, really dispirited and self-loathing, actually, I'd say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's just interesting watching this movie because I feel like you showcase his charisma. So, and I watch it, and it just makes me long for that version of A Star Is Born that would have had him and Streisand. That actually
we were talking about it yesterday, and there's several stories. Sorry, I got to take my jacket off. It's getting hot in here. But that's a great story. I mean, a great story. And look, it sounds like I'm banging on always about the Colonel, and people get like, the Colonel. I mean, there's no question the Colonel was a genius. But he was, in the end, a carnival barker who was a complete fictician. I mean, he was a Dutch runaway. What he actually did in Holland, certainly, he created a character. He was never a Colonel, never a Tom, never a Parker. But a genius of selling. I mean, he invented merch. Just wearing some merch here. But he invented merch. He invented all those things. But this kind of Virginia Woolf relationship between them, which makes them soar, eventually eats itself. And I think you're absolutely right. The Star Is Born moment, I mean, it's too long a story for here, but the Colonel just had I was so honored. Sorry to jump cut, but, you've seen my movies. They're all over the place. But I met Stoller of Lieber and Stoller last night. He was beautiful. Imagine that. And Lieber and Stoller, with his young kids, wrote Hound Dog, And I was like, I never not want to work with these guys. Colonel says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And he's making a deal with them, and he sends them a blank piece of paper with a line on it. And he says, just sign that. You know what I mean? And the games he played to keep Elvis completely isolated, particularly from really creative people. And Star is Born, I think, is a great example.
Well, and I love the way you deal with the Colonel in this movie because you have to acknowledge him, but I love that you just sort of dispense with him. His presence is felt. You do the thing using devil in disguise. It's kind of perfect.
That's subtle.
But it's like it quickly establishes what he is, who he was. You kind of have him. You see him lurking around the frame at time, but you don't let him take it over. I mean, this movie is a celebration. Like that's what I really love about it. Is there's so much exuberance. Like you can feel your love for Elvis coming through this watching the movie. And I'm curious for you. Well, first of all, you talked about the vinegar syndrome in the film cans and everything. This thing looks and sounds incredible.
Well,
so what was the process toward getting this stuff restored?
Look, first of all, there is, just in case, because it does come up, there's not a frame of AI in this film. There's not a visual effect. Big shout out to Peter Jackson and his Park Road team. I went down to New Zealand. Peter's they're very similar to us. They're our New Zealand cousins. We like the New Zealanders. There might be one in the house. But what Peter and his team do, we had 35mm anamorphic. So he takes the negative and he takes abrasions out of it. And what he does is he allows it to be able to reproduce at its highest quality. Then we take it back and we color it. I mean, color grading is kind of a very, very sensitive art, and it's just spending hours and hours and hours, which I did with our colorist, and trying to match actually what the 35mm anamorphic would be at its highest possible quality, And what's more remarkable is this really rare 8mm. I mean, I've seen it on IMAX, and I can't encourage people enough to go out and see it on a big screen. Any big screen is good. IMAX is kind of mind-blowing. Seeing it last night at the Chinese theater, people dancing and getting into it, and not just older people, younger people, but we wanted to make it as much as possible like you're actually in the concert with Elvis, but the pictorial resolution of it is achieved through just painstaking love, and Peter and his team have a love, and there's no one like them on the planet. Think of what they did with that First World War picture. Think of what they did with the Beatles. That's all 16mm. So that's what it came about from, and that's why, we, it's this revolution. I think I mentioned when we found the audio, we found how do we deal with all this footage? What do we do? And then one day we find this 40 minutes of Elvis just speaking about his life unguarded. And that was the light bulb moment. What if we just let Elvis tell his story, and the music kind of, is part of the storytelling. It's a bit like a dreamscape. That's why I say it's not a documentary. It's not a concert film. And that was our guiding light. And that's why it's kind of quite relatively short, because it's just about Elvis telling his story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you about the IMAX. I've seen the movie a couple times in IMAX, and again, just the footage looks incredible, and I'm wondering if you even could have made this movie 5 years ago, because I feel like this technology that Jackson and his people have evolved. Again, I saw their Get Back, and then also there was the other Beatles 64 documentary that they worked on, and all of this stuff. I just feel like it is creating this whole new wave of fantastic, rock and roll movies that we couldn't have had maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
I think it's true. I mean, AI will come up, and I have my own views on AI. I'm not scared of AI. I think there needs to be governance. But the thing about an AI, can I give an interesting example? The thing with AI is, right now, even as we speak, a lot of classic photos of Elvis have been taken, and anyone with a $2 app can make a picture move now, right? And you see a lot of these classic pictures of Elvis moving. And that's interesting. There's a bit of ooh, wow, interesting. But what AI can't actually do, I mean, there's a lot of things it can do, and there'll be an instrument for good in some areas and nefarious in others. But what AI can't actually do, when you see these pictures of Elvis moving, you go, the picture moves, but that's not Elvis. Because AI is perfect. It only does, isn't it like something? It scrapes. So it makes it like something in a perfect way. Human beings, what makes them human is their imperfection, is their chaos within. Now, if ever there was a poster person for imperfection and chaos within that defines them as a performer and as a person, it's Elvis Presley. So when you see those pictures move, you go, that isn't Elvis. That's a picture moving. There's a moment in the film when we're doing Polk Salad Annie, and we're trying to show Elvis conceiving it by, his incredible affability and connection with the band and getting them all to whip them up into being just connected spiritually. And then you see him performing, and there's a moment where he's just riffing. You see, they never knew what he was going to do. So Ronnie tried to be going like, how many rounds, and he's going, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, boom, boom. But they were poor, but they did all right. They were poor, but they did all right. And we're flashing back, they're poor. And I thought, God, we really want to see Elvis and the family because they were poor, but they did all right. And there was this classic photo, and I thought, it's kind of moving. Do we throw in a bit of AI and make it just move a bit? A little bit like it's film? And Jono and I talked about it, and Jono was like, no, we'll just do old school picture and let the picture and the sound and the feeling, let the audience make it in their minds. And I'm really glad about that because it's not to say AI won't have a function in big visual effects. It's going to happen. There's all these sort of side questions. But the truth is that you see that was analog, what we did. That is imperfect. That isn't something where an illusion of perfection. So soul would be the question I bring up. What AI doesn't have, and it's certainly wow, you go wow, but I don't think I've seen a piece of AI that has a soul. And, that's going to be the thing in the end. And the other thing is, it can't have an original idea, Now we're talking about AI. I don't know how we got there.
No, but that's it's such a great point, though, because that was maybe my favorite thing about the movie and maybe the biggest discovery for me as somebody who knows Elvis mostly through the finished products, through the songs, through the movies, whatever, was I loved seeing how improvisational he was and how when he sings a song, he's feeling it at that moment. Whatever he's feeling at that moment is what's coming out through that performance. And so the performances are always different. Like, it was funny because watching the movie, I was kind of in my mind trying to sing along. And it's like, you can't sing along because he's singing it different every time, and the way he would move in and out of just riffing, and it just was so much fun.
And the goofiness. I mean, I think people say, what's your biggest surprise? Because we saw so much footage, we couldn't use it all. The number one thing is his humor, but his goofiness. And I've got a bit of a theory about that, like his sort of goofiness. And what I think it is when I was doing Elvis the film and I was officing Gracelands, and I was looking for this guy called Sam Bell who popped up every now and then, and he was one of the little kids that you see in the movie. When Elvis is living in one of the few white houses in the black community, his house was on the back of Elvis. Dad was away, and it was just Elvis and his mum. And he told me the most beautiful stories. I all have them on video. He told me exactly the story of them going to the juke joint and the gospel tent. And I just put it in the film exactly as he told me. But he said, my grandparents never had a white person ever call, not a man, not a woman, nor a child, called them sir or ma'am. And they adored Elvis. They adored him as a kid. This is a 10-year-old. And they said because he called them sir and ma'am, and he used to fall asleep in the breezeway and always pretending he was playing guitar and stuff. And, he said, but he was so insecure because they were from East Tupelo. I mean, we had a nice vegetable patch, but they were so poor. And his father went to a very famous jail. And I think that shame was always inside Elvis. And yet he grows up into this kind of Michelangelo physical god. And he has this insane ability to take a song and make it his own, like Bridge Over Troubled Water, a folk song, and make it a gospel power ballad. So on the one hand, he's almost godlike on stage, but inside is this really insecure, incredibly polite, gentle, kind, empathetic person. So I think he goofs it up to make people feel relaxed. Because, you know, in a room, he'd be sort of going to the most uncomfortable person and making them feel relaxed. And, you know, not to babble on, but I'm quite good at that. Cissy Houston was in the Sweet Inspirations the year before. Cissy has a daughter called Whitney, and Whitney Houston meets Elvis at 10, well, like young. And he said, well, what was it like, Whitney? And she goes, well, it wasn't like you came into the room and it wasn't like you go, hello, Mr. Elvis, how are you? She said, you just stared because he was so striking looking. So I think he did it both to his band members, to everyone around him, to goof it up and be silly, to get everybody disarmed from the icon and connect with the person. And that's the magic in the music, is that they never knew what he was going to do. Ronnie Tutt's watching him like this. That number could have gone on for 5 rounds, you know? And that's the thing. It's totally organic and in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he was, you know, as you pointed out, I mean, he was so famous. Like, that must be such a strange experience, you know, like as you say, in those days, there wasn't necessarily a template for somebody being that young and that famous.
First.
And I'm wondering if you obviously, I think about like you having worked with like DiCaprio when he was young and things like that. Like you've been around famous people, but like has working on this movie and even on the previous Elvis movie, like how has it changed or informed your attitudes or view of what fame is? I
actually know quite a bit about it because, and I talk a lot about it. I know, I can't say names because my wife will play the dinging game, which she said, you can't say that, you know, because name dropping. But
no, I asked you. But
some of them are my friends, and one of them is, there's 2 things. Probably the most other famous person who swims in the same water as Elvis. There's only 2 of them, really. And the thing about that fame is that, and I worked with one of them twice. There's 3 of them, really, and the other one I had quite a bit to do with. And the thing about that level of fame, as another famous person told me, who's kind of a recluse, said, look, no human being is built to be that famous because the nature of it is such, and this is what happens to Elvis, is that the things that, it's easy for us to go, oh, look at them, they're so strange, why are they doing that, blah, blah, blah. But the things that fulfill us, a relationship, you know, love, different kinds of love, it just doesn't work when you become that famous. And what happens is, and you see it with Elvis, is the only love you trust is the love coming across the footlights.
I see people of all different ages and things out there, you know. If I do something good, they let me know. If I don't, they let me know that. Like, I work absolutely to them, whether it's 6 or 6,000, it doesn't really matter. It's just, they bring it out of me.
And so you give yourself to the audience, to the fans, and they give themselves to you. And it's a kind of absolutely sacred bond, you know. And that's why Elvis is on stage 3 times a day. He's doing what you see in this movie 3 times a day, giving himself completely. That's the only time they're truly at peace. I mean, look at him. Look how comfortable he is on stage. And yet, he's so uncomfortable off stage. And that is kind of the deal. The more that your supernova star rises, the lonelier you become.
Mm-hmm. Well, something that struck me about both of your Elvis movies was this revelation that Elvis wanted to travel, wanted to tour, but never performed outside of the United States. And it's interesting, before we started the cameras rolling here, you were talking about how you've been on a tour right now with this movie. And so it's almost like you're getting to take Elvis on this tour that he never got to go on.
Look, first of all, we absolutely are giving Elvis the world tour he dreamed of and never had. As I'm speaking to you in real time, all over the world, people are going to IMAX cinemas and seeing it for the first time, and it's so gratifying to see them say, it's like being in the concert with Elvis, and they're clapping and dancing, and it is in fact the world tour that he dreamed of and never had. And you see him say in the film, look, I'm going to go to England, I'm going to go to Japan. but he never does. When he creates this 1970s show where he's at his peak, he's doing it to take it on tour. And then the Colonel's got him doing a 15-day tour, 15 nights, cities in 15 nights, and then he does it again. And then he does it again. And then he does it again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until he dies. And he's a bit like a bird smashing against a glass window. He can't see what it is that's not. And I think he just eventually gives up the spirit to travel. But what if he had used his wings? What if he had flown? I'm not saying it wouldn't have ended exactly the same, but I can't believe that he wouldn't have been reinvigorated by new audiences and new experiences. So it's a great tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you had a lot of footage that you weren't able to use here because the movie is relatively short. It's like an hour and 40 minutes or so. And I don't know how many tens of hours you had, but are there any, it seems like you've probably got all kinds of other stuff that people would love to see. Do you have any plans for it, or do you know what's...
Yeah, well, I foolishly, when I did Elvis, the movie said there's a 4-hour cut, and now people are outside my house with banners going, release the cut, don't redact the footage. But there is, first of all, we've got to show the validity of the film in cinemas. Depending on how we go, that shows financiers, look, there is an audience out there that want to see this, because this process is not cheap. And if we do that, then I think I will train up. I don't think I can continue to do it. I got to get on. I got a little independent minimalist film called Joan of Arc to make. But I can't see Elvis ever quite leaving my building. So I would love to see... I mean, we have the whole of Hampton Road, which is a legendary performance that we've seen that's never been put out there. So I think it will be ongoing, and I hope... I'm not precious. I like to hand on my Moulin Rouge to like an Alex Timbers and say, go make a theatrical production. And when he was doing things that I know I wouldn't have done, I went, you know what, Alex, I'm backing you. I want you to do what I can't do. I can't be me at 40. So I'm hoping to sort of be Uncle Baz on this. And if we have enough people go and see this movie, then we have enough volition to hand on the next iterations. I mean, of course, we'll do great Blu-rays with, extra bits and things like that.
Great. Well, I really thought it was just a fantastic movie, and I loved the experience, and it is a great movie theater cinematic experience.
Yes.
So I agree with you.
See it in the biggest screen you can.
Got to see it on the biggest screen possible, in IMAX. This has been great, Baz. Thanks so much for
No, man, this is great, and, it's easy to talk to you.
Hey, good to see you.
You're a good chat.
Thanks. You too.